Welcome everyone to ABCD Open Scholar November meeting 2018. I'm Kate, this is Joe, we're the co-chairs of the Open Scholar group, and we also have today with us Anthony Morabel, who is our wonderful Harvard Web Publishing intern, and he's gonna present as well as the two of us. We're gonna be talking about workflow and governance today, some overall best practices, and then point out some specific features in Open Scholar that might be able to help you with that. This is kind of a broad topic and can get a little complex, and a lot of it is kind of outside of the platform, but we're gonna tie in, Open Scholar in addition to some overall best practices. So we're gonna be recording this, the screen share and the audio, and then posting that along with the slides later on with on the ABCD Open Scholar website. And then there will be time for questions at the end. And then also, if you have any thoughts and experiences to share with governance and workflow, because it can vary quite a bit and different people have different techniques that they like, we would also welcome you to share also. Got name tags, yearly or long-standing tradition, and then, yeah, that's it. And we will have open help at the end as well. So we'll present for about 45 minutes. And then come grab us with your laptops if you have any questions. So as always, want to review the ways to get help after you leave here today. There's the Open Scholar Support Help Desk. So now that they're their own company, it's a completely separate thing from HWP. Still have the Open Scholar Docs site. And then for any Harvard-specific documentation questions that you may have, you can go on the IT Help knowledge base and just type in your question. That's where a lot of Harvard IT help articles are going, so it's a great resource overall. And then there's still the platform trainings monthly here on campus, and then there are the self-paced training videos that go over the same activities that I go over in training also. So let's jump into it. What is website governance? According to Wikipedia, it is an organization's structure of staff and technical systems, policies, and procedures to maintain and manage a website. So like I said earlier, it can be kind of a broad and can get sort of complex in the issue, but we're essentially going to be going over different ways to maintain a website and keep the content fresh. So why is governance important? A website is often what people see first in regards to your group, organization, or project. Sometimes it's the only source of information that people come across. So it's really important in today's world to keep it fresh and up to date. Otherwise, people won't find you. If you're not updating your content, it will rank lower in search engine optimization. And if somebody comes across your site and information is out of date or there are broken links everywhere, it can be a very frustrating experience. Personally, that's more frustrating to me, is not having the content and the information that I need up there than to have a visually unpleasing design or anything like that. So content is really the most important thing, I would say. So after a site is launched, it's kind of shiny and new. People are very excited to keep it up to date and looking pretty, and it can go stale pretty quickly or after a certain amount of time. So it's really important to have a governance plan established and for people to follow that. And then governance and content strategy go hand in hand, since a website is ultimately a communications tool. So as you publish content, it's got to be planned and stay relevant in most cases. So I'm going to go over 5 sort of general best practices here. So getting buy-in from the community, setting people up for success, being realistic in your goal setting, and then laying the foundation for decision making, as well as establishing a framework for accountability. So number 1, getting buy-in from the community. So make governance a part of the website from the outset. So when you're planning or relaunching a site, when you're embarking on that project, I would have governance play a role in that, especially from the beginning, so you know that once a website is built and launched, it's not the end of a project, it's really only the beginning. So have that clearly established in whatever project plan you have. Another important thing is to align to organizational goals and priorities. So it's really good to map your website goals specifically to organizational goals. So, leaders and other stakeholders can clearly draw a link there, and you'll end up getting more support, more time and budgeting and resources towards your website if they're seeing that direct link to the bottom line of whatever your group is doing. Encourage content contributions. Website is often a group effort, especially if you have a lot of a story-based website that needs a lot of fresh new articles and things like that. So make sure that there's some sort of avenue that people can submit stories to you. Ask people, make sure there's some contact info or form, etc. And then it's always good to report on outcomes for your content. So if you're measuring content performance and letting people see the content outcomes, they will become more invested as well. Number 2, setting people up for success. So training and documentation, and this goes for the platform itself, whether you're using OpenScholar or a different content management system. And then for the content and your workflows that you've established, it's nice to have some sort of documentation outlining that as well. So the main question with that is, do people know where these resources are? Have the links to, the OpenScholar training and other resources, videos, have they been posted on, your intranet or your Google Drive shared folder or wherever you share information? Make sure that people know how to find these things, however you information share on your team. It's also good to create your own custom documentation for your sites. I mean, there are a lot of good resources on OpenScholar docs, but every website is going to be specific to you, whether you've done something custom more technically or you just have some content aspects and guidelines and standards that people need to follow. A style guide is often a good way to do that. Joe's going to talk a little bit more about some examples with that later on. And then make it an expectation that if you have some sort of web administering responsibilities in your jobs, that you're expected to get trained and to use these resources. And then also just explicitly delegate it in the responsibilities. If you're writing a new job description, make sure that that's in there whenever possible. Otherwise, sometimes there's not time or support dedicated for somebody who's kind of handed a website and it's sort of just like another thing on their list to do, and it gets lower in the priority levels. So it's good to explicitly delegate responsibilities and have it be a priority to set people up for success. And number 3, be realistic. Think sustainably. What goals are realistic for your site? What do you think you're going to be able to accomplish? What do you want to do over the next year? Do you want to do user testing, get more analytics reports? Think about what you'd want to do over a certain amount of time and what people are going to be able to maintain in the long term. OpenScholar has a lot of capabilities for repurposing content, so using various widgets and repurposing them and different posts on various pages. So whenever you kind of change something on one page, it can affect a lot of the other pages. So things like that where content is being repurposed, you're using taxonomy, state the purpose for all of those content decisions that you've made on your site, and make sure people know how it's going to affect the rest of your site as well. Again, it's a good thing to document. And then if you have any sort of third-party integration as well, you're updating or you're embedding a map, for instance, make sure people know how to update that if it's on a separate platform, and then you know how to get support from that other vendor as well. So just make sure people are going to be able to maintain these things over the long term, and they know how to find the documentation for it if necessary. Number 4, laying the foundation for decision making. So define and share content criteria, meaning let people know explicitly what you will and what you won't publish, so they won't request for a story to be published that is not one of the criteria for use on the website. Think through your content collection processes, like a web request form is always a good idea, or an email so people can submit feedback if they come across a broken link or some outdated content. Make sure those avenues are clear for reporting feedback. It's a good idea to use an editorial planner to plan for various content that you might want to publish throughout the year. So a spreadsheet with various, dates and topics that you might want to publish is always a good idea. And in that same vein, consider the content life cycle. So as you're planning for upcoming content and publishing, and as you're creating, you're writing, you're adding images to publish, to promoting, maybe on social media if you decide, and then to measuring and reporting out the analytics. And then you might also at some point want to retire that piece of content if it's no longer useful and relevant. So consider every stage of that if you're thinking through a workflow or a process for governance of your site. Number 5, establish a framework for accountability. So you can have a centralized model, a decentralized model, or some type of hybrid. So by centralized, that basically means one central web team owns the content creation and publishing process, versus decentralized, as each unit owns its own content and publishing. So maybe they're responsible for one specific section within the website. And in that kind of case, sometimes the standards and the content quality can vary a bit. Often a hybrid model ends up being used, but consider how big your team is and what might work best for you. And it's always good to map out your workflow or governance model. Who's going to have to review this before it gets published, etc. It's all about the documentation. And of course, define your roles and responsibilities, which we'll get more into in the next couple of slides. But again, to just be explicit about who does what. But basically, the goal of all of these is to ensure a sustainable plan for ongoing content creation and quality assurance. So here are some ideas about various roles that could be on a web team. A lot of this is really going to depend on your team itself, but a leadership team or some sort of overseer of the process or key stakeholder, decision maker, there's typically going to be somebody in that role. Sometimes you may have a web manager or webmaster, which can be a bit broad of a role, but I think of it as the product owner of a website. Content producer, meaning the writers of the content or editors, content strategists, planning your content, measuring its performance, optimizing for search engine optimization, and then content publisher, which that could be its own role entirely, or really just a piece of someone's role, where they're formatting for whatever platform that they're using. So they're formatting in the WYSIWYG editor, making sure it's ready for the web. Designer for visual design and user experience, and then a developer, coder, more technical stuff. Obviously, if you're using Open Scholar, you don't need a developer on your team, and Harvard Web Publishing can supplement a lot of these roles, especially with the designer piece. But if you have a smaller team, a lot of these roles are going to be kind of combined into one or spread out as an aspect of everyone's role, depending on if you have a more centralized or decentralized model. But just kind of being sure that you account for the various different roles involved in managing a website. All right, so Anthony's going to talk a little bit about members and roles in Open Scholar.
Members and roles in Open Scholar. Members and roles is a tool that you can find in the control panel from your site in Open Scholar. So once you click in the tab in the control panel that says members and roles, it's going to appear the members and role menu, as you can see in the screen. You can manage the members' permissions and roles. When it says people, permissions, roles, when you click people, it's going to appear all the members you have in your website. When you click on permissions, it's going to appear all the permissions by roles. You also can add new members by clicking on the Add New Member green button. The reason you might want to add a new member from your site is because they might help you with the maintenance of your site, by building, editing posts, and other things they can do. Once you click the Add New Member button, it's gonna show up this menu. It's the Add New Member menu. If the person you wanna add, they already have an Open Scholar account, you can write their username or email address on the box, and it's gonna appear there, and you can add them as a member. Also, if not, then you can tap the Create a New Member button below. There are different type of roles you can assign to your members. Some of them is administrator, content editor, basic member, and viewer. The permissions they have: as a site owner, you can edit posts, add new posts, and delete posts. You can make changes to the layout of your site, and you can delete your site. As an administrator, you can also add, edit, and delete posts and make changes to the layout. The only difference to the site owners is that you cannot delete the site. Content editors, you can add and edit posts that you created or other members created. Basic members, you can add new posts, but you only can edit posts that you have created, not others' posts for other members. As a viewer, you can only read the site, even if it's private, and you can share feedback to the site owner or administrator. Once you click Create a New Member button, it's gonna appear this menu where you can add their first name, last name, username, email address to add them, and then you can assign them a role and just click the Create Add a New Member. Now I'll pass it to Joe.
Thanks, Anthony. All right, we're getting some photos of us for our website to make it a little less, a little more personable. So that's why we're passing the camera.
On the editorial panel there.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So I'm Joe. I work with Kate, Anthony, and Kenton is here. We're all at HWP. So I'm going to continue this conversation of workflow, governance and workflow, talking about a style guide. Have all of you heard of a style guide and what it's used for? So across your website, you want to establish consistency in both the writing style and also the visual elements. And what a style guide generally does is establish those norms across the site for all of the people involved in writing the site and maintaining the site can be on the same page in terms of those elements. So in terms of the tone, the grammar, what are the image sizes, which I'll show you it, something like this going forward. How we title the posts, both publicly and how we use naming conventions internally. Those of you who have used Open Scholar, some sites end up with a lot of widgets, and there isn't a great mechanism for finding them. A little trick, which some of you might know if you're looking at a layout, is to use Control F or Command F. And if you've named all your widgets in a certain way, they're easy to find. It's just a helpful tip. I think I've worked on websites with like over 500 widgets, and if we didn't name them, then I'd be in a lot of trouble. So descriptions and read more button. So you have a set of what we call cards or blocks. How long should the descriptions be? 1 sentence, 2 sentence? If you want to make a read more button, how should you format that read more button? So we'll take a look at examples. So you'll find style guides in different forms, different mediums. Oftentimes you'll see them on a website here. The library has actually a really nice style guide. Just jump over there. So if you haven't seen this site, this will be in the presentation. And this that we'll post on our website. And this really has everything, including best practice, things to avoid, things to do. Our voice, this goes back to tone. So just a good reminder for all content producers. All right. Yeah, a different example is guidelines for even using the shield in signature. I'll show you an example here. In this case, it's a PDF doc, but here's an extensive style guide I can go through and give you some basic guidelines on how to structure, even from the margins from top to bottom, best practices on presenting the Harvard Shield. So those of you who don't know this site, so guidelines at HWP. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, well, it's a pin protected site. It looks like we can't get there right now. But this site, guidelines.hwp.harvard.edu, has all sorts of best practices in terms of formatting your content. It might not be specific to OpenScholar, but it's even with gathering images. What are the best kinds of images? Like point of view. Do you want to have the focus in the center of the image? So a lot of great information on that site. And I'm glad Susan's here because HDS does a great thing with the Confluence Wiki where they have some of the best practices. Here it is on their site. Let's get the first one. Great question. When to use an and versus an ampersand. So you get the idea. It just kind of gets all the content producers on the same page. It's very important to have consistency. Here's something that we actually gave to a client of ours. So this is the English site. So I'll take you there. And I think this is the graduate page. Right, so it's on the graduate page. They have a bunch of content. There's some banners. These little boxes we often call cards, and they're just little blocks of content. Each one has a certain way that it needs to be formatted. So in their style guide, your documentation, we told them that the images need to be this size, 600 by 400 pixels. You need to format the heading as a heading title as a heading 2. The description right here needs to be in a regular paragraph in the form. And then when you create your read more button link, just style it as a heading 4, and the CSS behind the scenes will make it into a button. So this is important for them as they're building or cut these cards out on their site or changing cards out. And they have cards here, and these are a little bit different. But you can see on other pages, let's say the graduate page, they might have similar cards here as well. So almost those same rules would apply on the undergraduate too. Yeah, so moving into more thinking about workflow, there is a feature in OpenScholar that allows you to save past revisions. How many people are aware of it or have used it? Okay, cool. So by default, it's on. I'm going to show you. So I'm on this test site here. There's a couple ways that you can access it. If you click on the hidden gear to edit, right below is your revisions. And here's your list of revisions here. If you actually go into the edit screen, you'll see in the right-hand side of all your metadata, you'll see there are currently 9 revisions. You click here, it brings up the same exact screen. And these are all the past revisions that we've made to this particular page. So you can keep up to 10. Once you hit number 11, the first one that you did will be deleted. It's available for not just pages, but news, people, events. I can see somebody's bio, right? They maybe want to keep a past version. Yep, like I said, only 10. The next one will be gone, and unfortunately, you won't be able to retrieve it. Yep, so we just talked about this, the ways to access the revisions. Let's take a look at how it works a little bit deeper. So here we go. So I'm going to go into this page, go into my revisions. So for each revision, there is a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it adds up to 10, right? The oldest is the lowest number, number 1. This is the oldest one. Of course, you can just look at the dates. And it appears at the bottom. So it's kind of reverse order of what you normally see, but this is the latest one. Some of the revisions will have revision notes, which is very useful. From here, you can view the revision. So let me look at number 9. Actually, yeah, let me look at number one that Bree did a long time ago. All right, so it shows you can read through the revision, and then, okay, I know what this says. Let's look at the first sentence. Academic advising is an important part of the learning process at the FAS. Okay, you can go back to your list. And you can see this note up here. It said I changed the first sentence to read Department of Archaeology. So let's view this. Now it takes me right to the production thing. Hold on a sec. I think I did it here too. Nope. Bear with me. Okay. So when you view the first one, it'll actually take you out to the production site. But you can see that the first sentence, this no longer says FAS. This says Department of Archaeology. Let's go back in. Let's say I want, you know what? I liked it better when it said FAS. You can revert this revision. And what it'll do is it'll make a copy of it and it'll put it at the very top. Yep. And so you still have this. So now you kind of have two. This is a copy of this number 8 now. And it puts it at the very top. That's the way it works to revert a revision. It doesn't just like overwrite and move it. It keeps the old one as well, but it tells you that it's a copy. So as a best practice, and this is transcends just copy editing for public-facing sites. This goes into programming, anything you do, right? You always want metadata. So if you are editing any page, you always want to go down here and add revision notes. Make it succinct. The changing department, right? Okay. So I put that changing department, and it could be more descriptive than that, obviously, but I don't want to waste time. When you go back into your revisions, you kind of have a note to say what you did. So it's just a best practice. Try to remember to do that. Now, it is on by default, so every time you save, it's going to make a revision. You do have the option to turn it off. If you're just going to remove like a comma, you could take it off, but it doesn't do any harm in general to leave it on. The only good thing about taking it off, if you want all 10, like you don't want to lose that one, then that would be a use case. But you can uncheck it if you want. And we talked about that. Talked about the notes. Does anybody use the revision notes before? Most people don't. use them. There's another thing called unpublishing content. This is another way that you can preview what the page is going to look like before it actually goes live. Let's say you have a new page in your section and you have a bunch of widgets there too. When you unpublish it, nobody can see that content except for the administrators and the content editors on your site. Even the basic members can't see it when it's unpublished. But 3 uses: preview a page before publishing, holding place for content for review, and then it can also be a place to retire old content. Let's say you had old events that you don't want this huge like pager that's 75 pages from events going back to like 2012 or 2010. You can retire your old events and they're still on your site. They're just not publicly facing because you don't think anybody has a true need to look for them. But the second bullet point, holding place for review, kind of speaks to this workflow idea where different people in the department need to take a look at the content before it goes live. OpenScholar has this feature and it can be used for that purpose. The shortcoming is the software doesn't allow for that interaction, that commentary. That has to be done by you outside of OpenScholar. Say, hey, change this. I don't like this sentence. Let me add an image here. Whereas other tools, even Google Docs, when you're writing a piece of content, people can comment on the site. You can have a discussion in the tool. And then there's some other third-party tools as well. So when you unpublish any page or piece of content, you'll see this pink background. That'll tell you that it's been unpublished. You can also go into the control panel and look in your content. In a couple of the more than a couple, 3 of the columns are sortable. One of them is published. So if you go in there and you click on the published right up here, you can actually sort by the ones that are unpublished. And you can even narrow it down further by selecting either title or type and/or to see all of your unpublished content. So the cool thing is I could, give this link to somebody on my team and say, hey, who's also administrator, hey, take a look at this new page I'm going to post. What do you think? And then as long as they're an administrator and logged in, they can see that. So I mentioned workflow. Workflow is a publishing process. The people involved in editing, checking, approving the content. Because at Harvard, there's a lot of subject matter expertise needed, and that often spans across a lot of different people. So there needs to be a process. The Open Scholar solution, again, which is missing that interactive piece, but it is an option. Using roles, folks that can access unpublished content, revisions, and utilizing the unpublished feature so you can communicate out to those stakeholders involved in that piece of content and say, hey, look at it and have that conversation about what needs to get changed and when it's ready to go live. Other workflow ideas, content tracker document. This is something that we use when we're building websites. In essence, it basically lists out all the content. In this case, it's using, I don't know if you can see that, it's using a Google Doc for each page. And the thing over here, it has a publishing status. So it has review 1, review 2, and then complete. And it has the folks who are responsible for reviewing that content and providing feedback. So this is just a sort of a basic way to get the status of each document. And this is generally used when you're writing new content or building a site, especially in bulk. This is really useful. So how about some third-party ideas? We kicked the tires a little bit. Kate probably knows more than I about gathered content. But one thing that is cool is you can see in this snapshot, seems like people are drafting, right, copy, and on the right, they're having that conversation. So that's kind of the missing piece in Open Scholar. So there are third-party tools that could be of use to you as well. It's just one example.